Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drumm McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at thechangeleader.com. This episode of Changing Higher Ed is sponsored by Perdea Education, a national leader in online student recruitment and enrollment services, providing institutions enrolled students risk-free on a performance-based model with no long-term contract. If your online programs could benefit from incremental online student enrollments, visit PerdeaEducation.com. That's P-E-R-D-I-A education.com. And now, here's your host, Drumm McNaughton.
Thank you, David. Our guest today is Dr. Philomena Mantella, president of Grand Valley State University. Dr. Mantella, who became Grand Valley State University's fifth president in November 2019, just before the pandemic hit, is an entrepreneur and an educator. Her entrepreneurial disposition and her drive to expand access to the university quickly became evident with its many initiatives she started in Grand Valley. Initiatives that improve pathways for diverse learners across their lifetimes and provide enterprises with higher quality talent. Dr. Mantella joins us today to talk about her latest collaboration, Rep4, which stands for Rapid Education Prototyping for Change, Learners, Community, and Equity. This is a collaboration among 6 higher ed institutions designed to accelerate innovation and at the same time provide thousands of learners a transformative experience where they embrace their own power to set the course and control their own learning journey. Philly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Drumm. It's great to be here with you.
And likewise, I am looking forward to this. There are not a lot of great places that you can say higher ed is innovating, and I think I found one today. And so we're going to talk about your initiative for Rep4, which stands for
Rapid Educational Prototyping for Equity, for Change, for Communities, and for Learners.
Okay, well, I was wondering what the 4 was about, and you just, thank you.
No problem.
We are seeing tremendous changes in higher ed. More money is poured into higher ed from the federal government than ever before. There's a lot of concerns about reverting back to the old ways of doing things, which is not going to work. I think you guys with Rep4 are coming up with a way for higher ed to break its own pattern. Tell us a little bit about what Rep4 is, if you would.
Well, thanks for expressing confidence in that. I do think we all are challenged when we work in a space over a long period of time of kind of refreshing our thinking. And so Rep4, the notion of Rep4 is that we have to bring our ideas, ground our ideas in the learned experiences today. What are students experiencing? I mean, we just came out of the pandemic, and it has been, I hope we're out of the pandemic. It has been just a momentous time of change. And so the data we have to collect is today. What our students experience? What do they want? What fits for them? So Rep4 is a way to engage pre-collegiate learners and their schools in the change process and meeting those needs, while at the same time helping them with a deeper sense of self-understanding about their own educational journey. So I like to think of it as sort of a 2-for-1. You get both. You get fresh ideas and you get students who are grounded in some new skills and some deeper thinking about how they want to approach their education, all for the purpose of really accelerating change in higher education.
Accelerating change in higher ed. What a concept. And so you've got a wonderful background from Northeastern and really in education startups. You started multiple campuses for Northeastern while you were there. One of the things that we talked about yesterday when we spoke was the goal of personalizing education systems. Talk a little more about that, if you would.
Education, and you probably heard this said before, it's really structured for the industrial era. It's structured as a supply chain. Students start at the beginning, they move through the beginning, middle, end, they reach a destination, and it just doesn't work today. There's no reason, with the personalization of everything else in our society, in our commercial offerings that we have in front of us, that we wouldn't think that every student brings a different experience, a different background, a different learning style, a different aptitude, a different mission in their life to the table, and that we can evolve, shift, or adapt our experience to meet that need. But it's really hard to do because we're all embedded in this structure, and all the superstructures, government funding, accreditation, are all wrapped around that structure. I think that young people can be of help by defining what's really critical to them for the adaptions, because it's not easy to wipe away a system grown over such time with such infrastructure and layers. So we've got to find those prototypes or experiments that we can embed. My experience, to say a few words about that, when I decided educational leadership was what I was interested in, and I realized I wasn't going to come up the traditional ranks, I tried to take my career on by being as holistic and kind of a 360-degree view of the educational institution. Could I, work from admissions to enrollment to student support? I did some fundraising. I did my degree in business affairs, my PhD in higher education. And so I tried to get strong around the whole institutional enterprise. My last stop, which was just a gift, was at Northeastern. I had been there 10 years, and they asked me to take on the responsibility for starting what was really an educational accelerator. We had lots of ideas. We had an appetite for risk. We knew some spaces we wanted to go. So I had the opportunity to lead kind of a separate institution, almost a child of the Northeastern parent, if you will, to start up global campuses, to start up boot camps, to look at new forms of digital education. And it was such a wonderful and growing, such a growth experience for me. I really learned how and why does innovation stick? There's ideas everywhere, but how do you make them get enough legs so that the systems, and that's what they are, can look at them and gravitate towards them rather than to sort of absorb them and they become the system. And so Rep4 is another manifestation of that thinking, really, of how do you put something together in such a way that you create the space for energy, but you also create the opportunity for the institution to see and experience it.
That's a great segue into, let's talk more about the details of Rep4. When we've talked before, student-driven, it's learner-centered design. Mm-hmm. So what's the process that you're using in Rep4 and who's participating? Because I know it's not just Grand Valley, but there's other institutions as well.
Right. I mean, one of the things we thought about really early on is we didn't want to go it on our own, that we wanted to bring others into the work that were excited by the work. And that gave us an opportunity to be seen, to draw energy and hopefully funding and support towards it. So there's 6 of us in total, all public universities, all anchoring different regions of the country, different missions. We have Fort Valley State University, which is an HBCU. We have San Jose State University, a research institution on the West Coast. So you can see, there's the 6 institutions. We have Amarillo College, which is a community college, Shippensburg State University, which is, of course, a part of the Pennsylvania State College system, and Boise State University, who is an R1. And we all anchor different regions. And we share a passion for innovation. We share a passion for learners being at the center of the work, believing in learner voice. And we share the public mission of higher education. And so Well, one of the things we said as we all came together is we want this to be an open architecture. We want what we learn to be shared broadly. We're going to do some things. We'll talk about, what Rep4 is, that will be creating platforms for that sharing. And maybe taking a moment to really kind of paint a picture of it. So the 6 institutions come together, and the concept is really a network of networks. So we each have a network of community high schools or community agencies that are participating with us. This is not higher education doing things for the pathways into higher education from high school or K-12. We're working with our community agencies and high schools, and what we're doing is not a best practice model, but it is a shared framework model. We are, in fact, all putting on learner design summits in which schools and communities that are connected to the work will have cohorts of students. They will be with us this summer for what is the equivalent of 5 days, and they will learn to appreciate design thinking. They'll learn liberatory design, which really focuses on being sure everyone has a voice and that it's paying attention to the underserved or unrepresented voice. And they will come together in teams and decide what issues they want to work on that are barriers for them or new opportunities. And they will design some experiments that we can look at as higher education institutions as improving our offerings. They could be anything from, hey, I've thought about applying, but you won't see me, which is the admissions process, to life skills, to I can't get my head around the way you all teach math education, and I'm really fearful of it when I get to the collegiate level. So it can be the students are picking the problems. Once they form and they kind of decide what they want to work on, attached to them will be some experts that can help them think about it. It'll be some faculty that can help them work through it. And at the end of the summit, they'll pitch their ideas as a team on their campus to undergraduates, which is also really interesting because we're not judging good and bad ideas. And the top 12 ideas will come to a national convening, 2 from each campus, that will be shared more broadly. So we'll share the experience of what we've designed. We'll share them in the student's voice. We're trying to get voters, undergraduates from across the country, certainly from our 6 institutions, to tell us what they think about the ideas. And then each of the institutions in the national convening will talk about what are they taking on? What did they like from this work? What are they taking on? How are they taking it on? Where are they placing the idea? Hoping that through the convening, not only are we seeing the value of learner voice in our educational evolution, but we're seeing how we might grapple with it in our institutions by the 6 institutions, really modeling, not the right answer, but our approach, our struggles, the things we worry about. And so that's it. So it really has 4 parts: regional summit, a national convening. We've all signed on to be places of experimentation, and then the virtual learning platform where we're going to share all the data.
Mm-hmm. So what you're doing in essence is coming up with idea to implementation to success.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in the first part now, you're doing the market research with students. And then you've got to figure out, by bringing it to the undergraduates, you've got to figure out, is this a valid problem? Did these folks experience this type of thing? So that's your market research. You'll come together as groups, the 6 campuses. You'll bring your top 2, or what you think are the top 2. How does something make the cut to be the top 2? What if you've got 4 or 5 great ideas?
Yeah. Well, so remember that each of our campuses can embrace every idea, but trying to really, think about what's our appetite among educators, both high school and college, to sit and listen to a set of ideas. And how long is the right length for a convening, right? You do this show and you say, well, it's 35 minutes virtually. So we're thinking, half a day is the most we're going to get people to commit to a national convening, and probably 12 5-minute pitches could be really the substance, and then what we do with them. So everything's available. Every idea is totally available for every campus. But that national convening, hopefully making the cut, is really to inspire others and to have them, quite frankly, join the movement. Come along with us, pick an idea, take our curriculum for the Learner Design Summit. It's totally available to you. And the reason is, I think, Drumm, that sometimes in education, it's a competitive industry, demographics are changing, public funding, there's a lot more of it this year, but it's constrained. We have no end of challenges, that we will begin to compete. And who loses when we do that? The public.
Mm-hmm.
So, because we're keeping our ideas proprietary rather than saying, hey, we'll get leadership from being on front of those ideas. Let's share them. Let's accelerate the learning by sharing what we learned, the mistakes we made, and then everybody wins, because education is going to be needed for a lifetime. And if we can break down the structures that make it happen only between 18 and 22 effectively, there'll be more in the pipeline for everybody, and everybody can win. Cost goes down. I'm an optimist, so I see the opportunity in working together. And one of the biggest hurdles has been really the skepticism. Well, can you really take on something that big, educational change? Can learners who haven't experienced something really help you change it? Well, yeah, that's the point. They can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. And so market research, you're going to the summits, the takeaway, more than one institution can work on the same particular issue that comes up. There's a prototyping. These are things you work with another institution. If two of you decide you wanted to do theme-based curriculum, which I know is one of the ones you're
Right.
talking about from Grand Valley. So you've got a couple of, you and Amarillo are working on, or Boise State are working on theme-based curriculum. You're doing a rapid prototype. You put that in place. It's obviously because you're looking at incoming freshman and sophomore class. So it's going to take a little while to evaluate, maybe not 5 years, but it's going to take a bit. I know trying to put in new curriculum and evaluate it at the post-secondary. I chaired our university's curriculum committee for almost 4 years. I get it.
Yep. That's so often, and it's an 8-year process before you've got your outcomes from the preparation through the curriculum student through graduation. And we've got to find some new ways, and those lighter touch experiments with the concepts that are strong can help us to get stronger constructs into the market more quickly.
And very, very important to have that evaluation, because, all higher ed institutions should be at this point data-driven decisions.
Absolutely. And it's the one thing we'll ask, when we say everything's open to you, the one thing we'll ask for is if you taking the concepts, the design thinking curriculum, the idea of theme-based curriculum into your university, share the basic data, around your experience with the platform so that others can learn. So that's the one thing we'll ask of people.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a critical element to be able to evaluate, make changes, because anytime you're doing a rapid deployment, whether it be software development or anything else, you've got to be able to get that feedback quickly, evaluate it, make the changes before you go live with the full process.
100% correct.
This is going to be interesting. You've already got 2 of these underway at Grand Valley, the theme-based curriculum, which we just mentioned, and you've got another one going as well, do you not?
Yes, we have one called the Life Skills Transition Curriculum. So the 2 student groups, we started out, we call it our MVP. We wanted to build a minimally viable product, a concept that we were playing with of these learner summits. And we had 20 students who last summer, in the pandemic, worked in 2 teams, and they came up with a theme-based curriculum. And the second thing was a life skills transition curriculum. And that what really grew out of these students. Many are first generation, many underserved, and from the areas hit the most hard by COVID in terms of unemployment rates and impacts. They said, I just don't feel like I have the life skills. I don't feel like I have the financial literacy. I don't feel like I have the study skills. I don't know the language of college. We don't talk about it in my home. And that's what the life skills curriculum is really about. So that's being tested. Like many universities, we had sort of a summer bridge that students could start their collegiate career a little more slowly, start the summer before freshman year, take a couple courses. This will be the curriculum this year in our summer bridge program. And then because Grand Valley authorizes nearly 80 charter schools, one of the charter schools put up their hand and said, we run a summer curriculum that sort of is microcosm of the high school curriculum. We'd love to try the theme-based curriculum. And that's where you pull 4 or 5 themes across every single class, whether they're math, geography, physics, social studies. You make that theme come alive. And so we'll see what pivots are made this year from having taken that first step. And then whether this, you can imagine the journey, right, where the charter school may say, that was so powerful for the students, I think we'll change the senior year. Or where we will say, maybe all of our summer offerings should have this component, or let's make the life skills a part of the freshman seminar. So you can see all the various places you can take it. And it will hopefully help change to occur more rapidly.
Well, I'm sure it will. And, as I recall, Yale's life skills class is one of their most popular. So I think you're headed in the right direction with that one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the big things with this is faculty have always controlled the curriculum with a shared governance model. How do you get faculty on board with this?
Yeah. First of all, it's to give them the respect and to participate and to understand it. Things like this aren't the usual process, right? So some of what we did, we had 2 of our deans, our Dean of Education and our Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, who made this a continuous theme within the faculty. What is it we're going to do? Why are we going to do it? Who's the alliance? What could my role be? We talked about all the possible roles. We have faculty who work on high-impact teaching practices. Well, you could pick, one of these groups and look at this as a teaching practice or a learning design. We have others who are doing their scholarship in an area that we have others who really are interested. We have a mathematics department that is always looking at new ways to teach in math. And so we shared out and then talked about the various roles from light touch to course release to, spending time here. And then what we have done, and this has been the hardest part, we've said, let the students do their early work first and define what is important to work on, and we'll come in behind. And we're used to exactly the opposite model. We define what they need to learn. We design it, they come in and register to our classes. So in some ways, we've been talking about the power, the potential, and the possibilities, but they'll get attached to the initiatives as we determine what they are. So we're still in that early journey, but I'd say, I can speak for Grand Valley. We have had more and more faculty gravitate towards it, and it's not yet saying, therefore, we need to do X, Y, Z differently. I think that people that are in education for their life, that want to do good in their disciplines, that love to work with students. First of all, the voice of the student is very powerful. So they're going to be powerful ambassadors for the changes. And then the experiments will stand on their own. And I think faculty will gravitate towards things that make their journey more successful. It's just that sometimes we introduce these changes from the outside. We introduce them as the expert. And we don't allow this organic process to come forward and help us understand the change, gain confidence in the change, hear students about the change. We think about curriculum as research, market research. You start it, you hire the faculty, and it goes on from there, rather than we're going to test some things, and that's more data. And that's the way we're thinking about this.
Mm-hmm. And it's like we had talked about yesterday. The most inspirational voice for faculty change is that coming from students or prospective students.
No doubt. Yeah, they absolutely, you can see when I started at Grand Valley, we did what we called a lot of huddles, and it was faculty, students, and staff together talking about two things: the essence of our university and the opportunities for the future. And the most powerful voices in the room many times were the students when they'd stand up and say what it is they were concerned about, why they were concerned. They become passionate advocates for change.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of change, trying to get your board on, boards typically are very risk adverse, and not many of them, it's unfortunate, but the vast majority of higher ed boards are made up with people who do not have a higher ed background, except having gone through university. You've got a board who's very supportive of this.
Yeah.
How did it get that way?
Well, I mean, you can say an institution the board picks the president. The president also picks the board back, says, I'm going to come because I know this is a board who is excited about what I can offer to the university. And I think, as a new president, I had that experience. I really felt like the board, first of all, they didn't have a partisan approach, and it's a governor-appointed board because it's a public institution with a governor-appointed board. So it could have a lot of dimensions in there that are not necessarily the most healthy. They were deeply concerned about the university and understood it. They could speak to it. And they were looking for someone that would help us move into the educational innovation space, into the places education needed to go. So the board, I think, was positioned well to have the conversation right from the very beginning, from the hiring of the president. And so our early conversations were, we need to think about how we position innovation and a space for it alongside of our strategic planning and our infrastructure planning. It is a very, very important dimension of planning. It's not just a nice to have or when you have time, particularly in this environment. And so we spend as much time, and this is Drumm, I think, what's unusual, talking about what's in that innovation lane as what's in the university's strategic plan, because we know one's going to influence the other. So yeah, I'm really blessed that they have been so supportive, so open-minded, and deeply interested in the university they serve.
And that's critical when I work with clients and we talk about strategic planning. It's always from a holistic perspective, which is what you're bringing to the party. You're looking at infrastructure, innovation, and the traditional planning. And because you're getting so much data back from these programs, and you've got a board who's willing to go out on the limb with this type of thing, you can bring that data back on an annual basis or even more quickly to make adjustments to the plan based on the innovation you're seeing. This is really, really good.
Yeah. No, exactly. And if you think about fundraising as an example, Drumm, and you think about the fact that many times we go out and we say, imagine with me that this can make an incredible impact on our university. Now we get to say, imagine with me that this, which I've tested, and here are the data that support the test, will make an impact on our university.
Mm-hmm. And you're doing this innovation by alliance. Mm-hmm. There's 6 of you schools, so there's a whole bunch of chances for far more data, more approaches that you can bring back to the board and say, this is working at Boise State, San Jose State, whichever school it is. We have similar demographics to this. We think this is going to work, or we think this is going to work a little differently because of the demographics, so we can make those adjustments.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what do you see the biggest challenges that Rep4 is facing?
Well, I think after the initial concept, because it is a hard concept, it's actually a concept used in business and industry all the time, right? You go out, you don't invent, the iPhone by starting with the existing system. You really invent it with what are the needs? What are the things you're trying to work on? What do you want to do that you can't do? And fresh eyes. So a big challenge was getting people to understand that people not yet embedded in the system could influence and improve it. I think when you see the first set of products, you hear these students will be beyond that. So that's not a challenge, I think, that'll be a long-standing one. I think the long-standing one with all the competition for president's time, and I think this requires executive time, because if you can't embed and support changes early on, then you frustrate people in the system that are your change agents. So it'll be sustaining the momentum and interest over a long period of time. I'm saying 10 years. Transformational change is not a 1-year process or 2-year process, even with rapid educational prototyping. So sustaining and growing this alliance over 10 years, that's going to be the challenge.
Well, really, you can't change a culture in 6 months? I'm shocked.
I do believe in possibilities, but not hallucinations.
I love it. I love it. That's great. So, unfortunately, just like I knew was going to happen, we are getting to the end of our conversation. And so I want to thank you. 3 takeaways for your fellow presidents and boards.
I guess first would be take a look at the concept of working in an alliance with others. And don't let the alliance be defined by the structures around us. Like we most frequently are structured, maybe it's the athletic alliance, or maybe it's the accreditation alliance. Pick out an alliance that's going to serve your learning. Like this alliance, our differences are as profound as our commonalities. That's number one. I would say number 2 would be to think about innovation the way you think about deferred maintenance, which is there has to be a constant reinvestment. It's not a luxury. And the third is these are incredibly important spaces for people who want to do more than their job description defines. And so for talent, for high potential people, for your faculty who are passionate about being at the edge of their discipline, these can be great channels when oftentimes we find ourselves saying, no, we don't have the opportunity to support everybody who wants to grow and develop in X and Y ways. So those are the 3 things, Drumm, I would say, is innovation structures are an essential, alliances are critical, and watch for your high potential people because you can unleash them to this kind of work.
And that's the kind of stuff they love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so what's next for you, Philly or Grand Valley or Rep4? What's next?
Well, sometimes I kid myself and I think when the plane just gets in the air, because a lot of times you're building it and flying it, it's often sailing. So, I got to follow my own advice and stay on this journey to really, Rep4 is a construct more than anything else. And today we're focused on 11th and 12th graders and the things that support them in those first couple of years and before they get to us, which is great. But why couldn't tomorrow it be imagining new forms of integrated work and learning or new forms of lifelong learning? So I see this as a long-term journey. I came to Grand Valley because I think it's an institution with an unusual set of assets and characteristics. And personally, I think institutions in this space that really want to move, want to make a difference, maybe haven't had the 100, 200 years of history or brand identity are going to be the ones that are going to be defining the future. So I'm on this ride, I think, for the long term.
That's great. Well, I'm glad to have you in the pilot seat on this one. This is great.
Thank you.
Philly, thanks for being on the show, and I look forward to the next time we get to chat.
Thanks, Drumm. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks for listening this week, and a special thank you to this week's special guest, Dr. Philomena Mantella, President of Grand Valley State University and for her sharing with us details behind REP4 and how it will become a catalyst for higher education transformation. Our next guest is Dr. Danielle Wilkin, President of the University of Bridgeport. You may recall a podcast I did about a year ago with Mark Scheinberg, President of then Goodwin College, where we discussed Goodwin's coalition that was acquiring the University of Bridgeport. Well, as there typically is with any acquisition, there were twists and turns in the road, and what came out of the acquisition was a much stronger University of Bridgeport, which becomes a great example of the changing new normal in higher ed transformation.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drumm McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.